Murder on the Orient Express is a timeless classic of a murder mystery, featuring Agatha Christie's most well-known detective, Hercule Poirot, in what is not only a wonderful mystery with twists and turns aplenty, but also a major turning point in said character's emotional journey across the 33 novels, 2 plays, and more than 50 short stories in which he was the lead. It's no surprise then that since its publication in 1934, there have been a whole host of adaptations for the screen. Firstly, the 1974 version for the big screen, starring Albert Finney and an all-star cast. Then the 2001 made-for-TV movie with Alfred Molina as Poirot, which was also set in modern day. In 2010, David Suchet's iconic TV run, where he adapted every major story in which the character appeared, finally told its own version. In 2015, there was a Japanese adaptation of it as well, which, from the Wikipedia entry, sounds fascinating. I might have to search that one out. But then, in 2017, the world was introduced to a new version of Poirot, one with a massive mustache.
My name is Hercule Poirot, and I am probably the greatest detective in the world.
Kenneth Branagh, the middle of 3 children, was born on the 10th of December 1960 in Belfast, the son of working-class Protestant parents. Growing up, he discovered not only a love of his family and hometown, but also of the world of the big screen. Even after moving away to join the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, those experiences of his youth clearly stuck with him, having once stated, quote, "I feel Irish. I don't think you can take Belfast out of the boy." And judging by his recent movie Belfast in cinemas now, that certainly rings true. When asked what drew Branagh to this story, he responded, quote, "This glamorous tale of a tangle of strangers locked together on a fabulous night train through Eastern Europe explodes from within, as one of the passengers is savagely murdered, while the train lies perilously trapped in snow. Danger stalks this journey, and while violence and horror reveal themselves, I found that on reading the novel, its underlying emotional quality is what most haunted and moved me." We open at the Wailing Wall, Jerusalem, 1934. A young boy runs through the streets of this holy city on a desperate quest. Breakfast. Poirot operates as a fairly conventional, logical and clue-based detective, reflected in his vocabulary by 2 phrases. His use of the little grey cells and order and method. A world-renowned Belgian detective and former police officer, Poirot often purposefully brings his eccentricities to the forefront in order to aid his judgment of a suspect's character. A priceless relic has been stolen from the church, and a rabbi, a priest, and an imam are the 3 lead suspects.
It is like the old joke, yes?
The police find no clues, but Poirot, with his keen skills of observation, notices a scuff on the wall from an expensive shoe, not the scuffy poor ones the holy men wear, leading the detective to believe it's the chief inspector himself who committed the theft and used his place of power to frame those he's meant to protect. An attempted escape is foiled by a well-placed cane, though how Poirot knew to place it there feels pretty superhuman in comparison to his other deductions. High above, Hercule pronounces to an officer his intent to take a well-earned vacation in Istanbul. At the boat in Jerusalem, which is actually shot in Malta, Poirot meets Daisy Ridley's Mary Debenham and Aaron Burr, I mean Dr. Arbuthnot. Later during the journey, the detective manages to overhear a conversation between these 2 supposed strangers.
We should be out of this, Mary.
Not now.
This entire intro is created for the film, perhaps explaining why the earlier cane scene is so unfitting for Poirot's typical powers of deduction. Of course, readers at the time were well aware of who Poirot was and all his quirks, so there was no need to properly introduce him like is done here. The opening serves to introduce to the audience not only how the detective acts, but also how a typical case of his goes. He deducts the crime easily, and the moral implications are clean-cut, black and white, so that when we board the Orient Express and those lines get messy, we know without being told that this is an unusual experience for him. In Istanbul, Poirot is enjoying his vacation, savouring the local pastries, when he comes across an old friend, Monsieur Bouc.
Mon ami! Now I am no longer a policeman. I cannot bail you out when this goes badly, eh?
It's in this packed scene that another gentleman enters, giving him an urgent case requiring Poirot to cancel his well-earned rest. Luckily, Bouc runs the famed Orient Express and is able to get his friend a room on the train.
3 days free of care, concern, or crime. You will love it.
In a sweeping and incredibly technically impressive shot, they rush to the station, barely in time to board. Unfortunately, the entire train is full, but Bouc manages to work his connections to find Poirot a space in room number 3. It's in this 3-minute-long one-shot that we're introduced to a few of the fellow guests portrayed by the all-star cast. Not only did they build this station, but at its centre is a working mile-long train track built specifically for this film. This set was faithfully recreated by production designer Jim Clay and his team at London's Long Cross Studios to match as closely with a station from the period. A very real train is seen departing from the inside, and a very CGI train is seen departing from the outside. Of course, this is a murder mystery, which means not only do we need suspects, but we also need at least one victim. Let's take a moment to have a look at everyone on this train who could be involved. Ratchet is a small-time gangster, it seems, who is on the train with his secretary and his butler. So he has money, but he doesn't have peace of mind. Someone is after him, so he seeks Poirot's help. Masterman is butler to Ratchet. He appears to be entirely obedient and polite, but in Derek's hands he's played more with a cockney swagger and a no-nonsense demeanour. Hector Mcqueen is secretary to Ratchet. He seems to drink and smoke more than is good for him. Caroline Hubbard is a husband hunter, or so she says. She charts the inner loneliness that Agatha Christie knew well, of being a woman, alone, and travelling in difficult circumstances. And so the intrepidness, the pioneer that is Christie exists in Miss Hubbard. Willem Dafoe takes on the role of Gerhard Hardman, an Austrian university professor with a penchant for white privilege. Mary Debenham is a recently unemployed governess, full of energy, very forward-looking and thinking. Miss Pilar Estravados is actually the name of another character from a different Poirot novel. She's a very impassioned missionary, travelling the world to try and make a difference. Princess Dragomirov is a Russian royal who deigns to come onto the train, played by Dame Judi Dench, alongside her maid, Hildegard Schmidt, portrayed by Olivia Colman. Pierre Michel of Avignon is the train conductor, and unwittingly thrown into the role of suspect. Not only immensely proud of his job on the Orient Express, but also fiercely loyal. Mr. Marquez is another new character to the story, a salesman in every sense of the word. Dr. Arbuthnot, portrayed by Leslie Odom Jr., is a man of great tenderness, the soul of a romantic who at his core considers himself a good man. Count Adrani is a dancer. He's also seemingly always angry. A short temper makes an easy suspect. The Countess Adrani makes few appearances, but when she does, they are open and telling. Monsieur Bouc is a debonair bachelor, a ladies' man who has lived his entire life in privilege and comfort, who suddenly finds himself having to step up for the first time in his life after being thrust into a dark situation. Poirot wears this absolutely ridiculous mustache mask. Later at dinner, he's approached by Ratchet, who confides that he fears for his safety aboard the train, requesting his help to ensure he arrives at his destination safely, but Poirot, seeing Ratchet's character on full display, refuses to help. Inside the carriages, we can see the environment passing by through the windows. In a production like this, you may expect these to actually just be green screens, with the footage added in post. While Branagh did some tests to see if shooting on an actual moving train was possible, they instead projected the footage from a train onto massive LED screens. This not only helped to ensure there weren't any issues with the backgrounds in post, but also immersed the actors into their roles and location. A very similar bit of technology is used for the production of the Disney Plus series The Mandalorian, in which they actually use a circular stage surrounded by LED screens. These project the fantastical environment around them in real time instead of in post. That night, Poirot encounters a number of disturbances to his sleep, starting with a noise from Ratchet's room, to which he ensures the conductor there's no issue. Mrs. Hubbard rings the bell for assistance. a lady in a kimono running through the hall, and most importantly, an avalanche bringing the train to a snowy halt. The next morning, in yet another incredible long shot, this time from above looking down, Poirot discovers the body of Ratchet in his room, stabbed 12 times. Dr. Arbuthnot is desperate to be in the room where it happened, so he quickly checks to make sure Ratchet is in fact dead. At Book's request, Poirot takes the case and quickly discovers a number of secrets held by his fellow passengers. Ratchet's butler has terminal cancer and hated his employer, as did his secretary, who was soon caught disposing of evidence outside the train in what is a pretty cool chase sequence. Help has arrived by this point in an attempt to dig the Orient out of the snow. This lull and appearance of safety leads Poirot to confide in his friend a tragedy from the past, in which a young child, Daisy Armstrong, was abducted and murdered by a man named Cassetti, who in truth was Ratchet. This crime not only affected the victim, but also all those around them. Both her parents died due to grief, and the woman, wrongly accused of the crime, soon followed suit. This far-reaching act of evil destroyed so many lives by ending just one. Miss Hubbard claims she sent someone in her room the night of Ratchet's death, and since her room had a locked adjoining door between the two of them, it's supposed the killer used said door to avoid being seen by the conductor watching the hall. Miss Debenham denies having known Dr. Arbuthnot prior to their journey on the train. The killer manages to dispose of some evidence, including the kimono, in Poirot's own luggage as an effort to taunt the detective. We learn that McQueen was stealing money from Ratchet, and it was the documents proving his theft that he was disposing of. Perhaps the not-so-faithful assistant killed his employer before his crime was discovered. Poirot, Book, McQueen, and Dr. Arbuthnot are all together when they hear a scream from Miss Debenham, and find her stabbed, non-fatally, in the back. A clear attempt from the killer not to strike again, but instead to dispose of evidence. Poirot discovers one by one that somehow each inhabitant of the train has a connection either to Ratchet or to the crime Cassetti committed in the past. So they all have a motive, but who was it that reaped their own vengeance against this monster? Watching the movie, you might notice a small layer of visual noise on some shots. Typically, this is a result of low lighting conditions, but here it's largely because of another reason. Murder on the Orient Express, along with Dunkirk, is one of the first major productions to be shot in 65mm film, since another one of Branagh's productions, Hamlet, in 1996. Shooting on this high-quality film allows extra, more lifelike details and colours to be captured, as opposed to using something like 35mm or digital shooting. Although the recent advent of 4K digital does help to convey more vivid, lifelike colour in every shot. In fact, shooting in 65mm is so uncommon that there was no lab in the UK capable of transferring the footage from film to digital. So production had to build their own lab just to transfer their footage. The next morning, as the train is freed from the snow and able to depart, Poirot meets again with Mary in an empty car, and accuses her as the perpetrator of the crime.
Miss Debenham, you planned Ratchet's murder.
Cassetti was a pig. He deserved to die.
She didn't kill him.
Dr. Arbuthnot reveals himself to be the killer. He was good friends of Mary Armstrong's father, who killed himself due to grief. In his solace, he met Mary, who had served as the governess of the murdered child. The two fell in love as they both dealt with their loss and, upon discovering Ratchet's true identity, decided not to throw away their shot of dealing their own form of justice.
My sins are mine to pay for alone. I'm a soldier. A soldier kills to protect.
After a brief tussle, Poirot is pinned to the ground by the not-so-good doctor and is only saved when Book steps up, completing his character arc and saving his friend.
It is time to solve this case.
And he solves the case. That's it, done. Okay, so I'm gonna spoil the ending now, so if you haven't had the chance to read Murder on the Orient or watch one of the many adaptations, I'd recommend just turning the video off now or skipping to the time code at the bottom of the screen here, this kind of area, I guess. I'll give you a second to do that. So, you like jazz? In the dead of winter, not only is the entire Orient Express full of passengers, but somehow every single one of them has a connection to the Armstrong case. Coincidences happen, but at some point they become too many in number to explain away. For there was not a single killer of Ratchet, but 12. One for each stab wound. With the assistance of Pierre Michel, the conductor, they all snuck into Ratchet's compartment and brought justice upon the child murderer, who had, in the act of destroying one life, destroyed the lives of so many others. A soldier kills to protect, and that's exactly what Dr. Arbuthnot was trying to do when he confessed to the crime, so that his life would be taken and everyone else could go free. Poirot began this journey needing everything to be uniform, but in a case like this, where the lines between right and wrong turned grey, where the question of justice does not have a simple answer, what is he to do? Legally, everyone committed a crime that would sentence them all to death, but just because it is law does not mean it is just. The murder of Daisy Armstrong all those years ago resulted in the end of 5 lives. Daisy, her mother and father, the maid who was wrongly accused, and Ratchet. In those final moments, Poirot is left with a choice. Should that first crime be allowed to end another 12? Placing a gun on the table, he gives them an ultimatum. If someone takes the gun and kills him, their secret will be kept.
Do it! One of you!
They don't. Having arrived at the station, a final long shot takes us through the Orient Express and past every suspect, although it is unfortunately cut up in the final version. Behind the scenes footage shows the impressive and complex movement occurring behind the camera to accomplish this shot. As he departs, Poirot expresses to the cast that he will simply have to live with the imbalance of justice in this case, as their secret will be kept safe with him.
There's been a murder, sir. Right on the bloody Nile.
Wait, there's been a death? On the Nile? Does that sound familiar to anyone?
A chef and enough champagne to fill the Nile.
Murder on the Orient Express is an incredible story and mystery. The movie adaptations vary wildly in quality, with this particular one landing somewhere in the middle. The film oozes style and certainly looks gorgeous, due in part to being shot in 65mm, along with the slick cinematography by Harris Zambo Lucas, who, fun fact, also shot Mamma Mia. The characterization of Poirot is very well done, with Branagh doing enough to draw out his eccentricities while still allowing him to feel human. The development of the other characters varies, with some given plenty of time and others feeling incredibly one-note. The script manages to regularly be exciting and funny, with a sense of mystery pervading throughout the majority of the ride. Ultimately though, where I think it fails is in the emotional connection to the characters. As Branagh stated in the beginning, what drew him to the story originally was the underlying emotional quality of the novel, and while there are some good attempts to have you bond with these characters and the crime, the film never really pushes itself far enough to make me truly feel for the loss of the Armstrongs. The crime committed by Ratchet is horrifying, but the way it's delivered to the audience is very much as an outsider. We don't feel the impact of that loss. Everyone says they're sad about it, but apart from the Countess Adrani and Miss Hubbard, we don't see any remnants of that loss pervading. The number one rule in film is to show, not tell. We don't need to see Daisy Armstrong die, I don't want to see that, but we need to see the effect that has on the people around her. And unfortunately, a minute-long black and white flashback told from an outside perspective isn't enough, personally, at least, to forge that emotional connection for me. Ultimately though, the film is a fun time with a solid mystery at its centre, with a slew of great performances by its all-star cast, and a pacing that keeps things moving constantly, plus some very impressive, often several minute long shots managed to visually impress. Murder on the Orient Express is a good, if not perfect, adaptation of Agatha Christie's novel that I recommend if you're interested in it. Death on the Nile is in cinemas now. I've yet to have a chance to watch it, but since I rather enjoyed Murder, I'll certainly be checking it out when I can, and I recommend you do too. It's more important than ever to support your local cinema and these kinds of blockbusters, as more and more movies get pushed onto streaming services and away from the big screen. Next week I'll be taking a look at the underappreciated action comedy Mr. Right, starring Sam Rockwell and Anna Kendrick. Of course, I'd appreciate massively if you could hit that like button down below. It helps out massively with the whole YouTube algorithm. Just before you go, for all those who've stuck around, I'd like to read you a little quote from Agatha Christie that I particularly love. "I have sometimes been wildly, despairingly, acutely miserable, racked with sorrow. But through it all, I still know that just to be alive is a grand thing." Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, guys, I hope you have a beautiful day and an even brighter tomorrow. See ya.
It's the ultimate whodunit. Meredith Baxter, Peter Strauss, Chocolat's Leslie Caron, and Alfred Molina. Murder on the Orient Express. CBS Sunday.